to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman Bernanke. Thank you for being here and your long patience and endurance. Let me just ask you, how involved is the Fed in the day-to-day management of Bank of America? For example, does the Fed have veto power on major decision-making at Bank of America? And has any consideration been given to replacing upper-level management?
The Fed is not involved in day-to-day management. That's the responsibility of the board and the management. We are involved in evaluating the capital, the assets, liquidity, and the management of the corporation. We have had concerns about aspects of the management, and we have asked the board in particular to add independent directors, which they are in the process of doing, and we'll continue to be very careful and monitor the management situation. But we do not take daily decisions. That's not our job.
Mr. Chairman, let me ask you, when the government invested heavily in AIG, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, management was actually replaced. Why was the fate of Mr. Lewis so different in this instance?
Well, I think in this case that the merger was undertaken in good faith. It was at the time looked like a reasonable combination. A lot of firms suffered severe losses in the fourth quarter. It was one of the worst quarters, I think, in history in terms of financial losses. Our judgment at the time was that he could continue to lead the company, and we have not addressed that. But obviously we'll continue to evaluate management and the board as we go forward and make sure that we're comfortable with the leadership of Bank of America.
In an email from Mr. Wash to yourself on December the 30th, Mr. Wash writes, and I quote, "Ken Lewis is going to call you to reaffirm the understanding you have. Ken may also raise his favorite perennial issue, that is the Richmond supervisory team on same page as the board. Richmond staff was on our call today, but prior to the call, it sounds like they may have threatened a little more than ideal our need to get rid of dividend and fast. I told Price System will be making joint determinations. My question is, to your knowledge, do you think that Mr. Lewis's interaction with the supervisory team at the Richmond Fed threatened, coerced in any way, Mr. Lewis?"
Well, the Federal Reserve in general throughout last year was concerned about Bank of America's capital, particularly its tangible common equity. And the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, which was the supervisor of Bank of America, was interested in having Bank of America increase their capital, perhaps by reducing their dividend or through other measures. At various points, there were some confusions, I think, about what the position of the Fed was, because there were miscommunications between the Richmond Fed and the Board of Governors in Washington. And Mr. Lewis, far from being intimidated, was free to call me and ask me for resolution of these issues, and we made sure that everybody was on the same page and got that cleared up.
So it would be a normal interaction in terms of...
Yes, a normal process.
Saying, look,
yes.
I'm having some concerns with Richmond and
yes.
that kind of thing. Mr. Chairman, let me ask you, you've gone on record as supporting increased transparency in connection with Federal Reserve Board operations, yet the bailout of Bank of America was done behind closed doors without investor public knowledge or input. Could the American people really understand in any way what happened? I mean, what really happened? Was Mr. Lewis bullied into going forward with his own bad deal? Or did Mr. Lewis recklessly agree to pay too much for Merrill Lynch so that the federal government felt backed into a corner when faced with the prospect of Lewis backing out of the Merrill deal, and of course we experienced the inevitable bankruptcy of Merrill Lynch. Could you respond to those?
Yes, sir. Today, I think, has been very productive in terms of transparency and more information about what happened. Clearly, there was a very difficult period and many complex problems that were being addressed, but as I've indicated, I believe that we solved this problem without in any way taking steps that were either beyond the law or unethical. And I believe we did the right thing in order to stabilize both companies and the financial system.
Gentleman's
Thank
time.
you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Gentleman.